Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final episode in our podcast series exploring how employers can build workforce resilience in a changing legal landscape. My name's Jess. I'm an employment lawyer and PSL at VWV.
And I'm Sarah, an HR consultant and director at Narrowkey HR. Over this podcast series, we've looked at pay and reward strategies, the Employment Rights Bill, and how consultation can build trust and reduce risk. Today, we're finishing with a group that has a huge influence on how change actually lands: line managers.
Absolutely. Line managers are often the people who translate policies into practice, and they're the first point of contact when something changes. And how they communicate, support, and guide employees can really make or break the success of any initiative.
They're also the people employees trust the most. Research consistently shows that team leaders are the most credible voice when it comes to explaining the why behind change. But that means we need to set them up to succeed.
So let's start then with the legal lens. And many of the upcoming changes in the Employment Rights Bill, like day one unfair dismissal rights, are going to place much more pressure on line managers. And so they're going to need to get conversations right from the start, especially when managing early performance concerns or probation reviews.
Exactly. Where in the past, managers may have relied on the fact that there is a 2-year qualifying period to bring unfair dismissal claims as a safety net, that option's going to disappear. So it becomes even more important to equip managers with the tools and the training they need to have confident, fair, and well-documented conversations.
Yeah, and of course, it's not just about avoiding claims. If a line manager handles the situation badly, whether that's a clumsy message about pay or a rush dismissal, there's going to be an inevitable impact on morale, trust, and ultimately retention of staff.
You're so right, Jess. And a message we often get loud and clear from line managers is a lack of time. They're often stretched, especially in operational roles. So employers really need to scratch their heads and think about how they can make it easy for them to do the right thing, whether that be by having really clear policies, giving practical guidance, and importantly, allowing them to have access to support from their peers, their HR team, and mentors when they need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree, Sarah. And in terms of what makes a difference in practice, well, first, I think clarity. Managers need to understand basic legal principles. And I'm not talking about, in technical terms, but in plain language that they can apply to a given situation.
Yeah, that's right. They also need permission to get involved and be trusted to have some of those difficult conversations, and some structure on how they ought to do it. Having a list of bullet points or a checklist for a difficult conversation isn't patronising, it's empowering. It helps managers to stay on track, use consistent messaging, and avoid putting their foot in it, to speak bluntly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we often see problems, don't we, where a manager might well have the right instincts, but they've used the wrong words, or they've, not communicated in the best way. Or, on the other hand, where a decision has been made and there's not the right documentation in place to back it up. So I think training on how to hold, those challenging meetings like probationary reviews or just feedback meetings or responding to flexible work requests, that type of skill set and equipping your managers with it, that can really go a long way.
You're absolutely right. And also, let's not forget the tone of a conversation is very often just as important as the content. When managers are rushed, they're unclear, they're defensive, even sort of well-intentioned conversations can go badly.
I think in order to sort of mitigate against the risk of all this type of communication going wrong, it's important to remember that there are lots of practical tools that employers can offer. to support line managers. So things like short guidance notes or how-to guides on key issues, decision-making flowcharts, or as you've said, Sarah, maybe some scripts or checklists for common situations, as well as FAQs, which may be a link to new policies or changes so that they've got, that bank of resource there to refer to help them manage.
I think it's also really important to ensure that your line managers understand the context in which they're operating and the wider processes that are at play. So, for example, linking performance conversations to existing appraisal systems, objectives is really helpful, or flagging upcoming reviews to your HR department early so that they can get support on how to deal with issues in a timely manner in accordance with those wider processes is really useful.
Yeah, that's right, I think, Sarah. And where the stakes are high, so where it's an important conversation, such as a dismissal during a probationary period or a change to contractual terms, I think it's really important that line managers know that they should be pausing and checking in with HR before jumping into conversations like that. So a short check-in with HR and making sure that the HR team are fully informed and aware of the situation and have the opportunity to advise before the conversation takes place. That can, often prevent a costly mishap.
Yeah, and one of the things we're often asked to do for employers is provide training for line managers on essential HR. And often, as a part of that, we do a session on navigating difficult conversations because really that permeates the whole spectrum of employment issues and the employee life cycle. And what we really encourage delegates who come along to those sessions to do is to start putting some of the ideas and the theory into practice. And we find that by doing that, it can really make a huge difference to confidence levels and really help to develop an understanding of how to plan and structure some of those conversations. Ultimately, managers don't need to be legal experts, but they do need to feel equipped and confident to go into these situations in order to get the best outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, Sarah. And, I think an investment in training like that can really pay off in terms of developing confident line managers who are also effective. And I suppose sort of linked to that point is this point about involving managers in plan changes. So, our listeners are going to be well aware of the importance of giving your staff as a group a voice and making staff feel listened to, whether that's, formally through consultation groups or, informally as well. But within that wider staff body, I think it's important to recognise the value that can be gained from involving line managers early in change processes in order to secure their buy-in really and make it more likely that change is going to stick. Your line managers are in quite a privileged position within the organisation in a way, in that they will be closer to those larger teams, and they're going to be more likely to know what's going to land well and where the likely challenges are going to be when you're making strategic plans.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say engage with your managers at the design stage of these projects if you can. Their input is valuable, but also they'll be much better advocates for change if they understand the thinking behind it and feel as though they're part of it rather than being done to.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, probably too often change is rolled out to managers instead of going through them. And if they're going to be entrusted by your organisation to lead conversations, then ideally they'd be brought along on that journey at the earliest opportunity.
So I think what we're saying, to wrap it up, Jess, is that line managers are very often your secret weapon. They shape employee experience day to day, and their role is only going to become more important as the legal landscape changes over the next couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can equip your line managers with clarity, and an understanding of the law insofar as it practically applies to them and their teams, and give them some of those tools and support that we've talked about, then they're more likely, I think, to carry your strategy forward. And on the other hand, I think if you leave them in the dark, then you're going to risk inconsistency, conflict, and ultimately missed opportunities.
That brings us to the end of this podcast series. We hope you found it helpful as you plan for the year ahead.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for listening. And I suppose a final note from us is that a reminder really that resilience is not just about cost cutting and managing budgets. It's a mindset, a culture, and a way of leading effectively.
Bye for now.
Bye bye.